People always ask me what betrayal feels like. And for a long time, I didn't have an answer because I thought betrayal was something that happened to other men. Not me. Not Timothy Walker. I'm a man from Houston, Texas, who spent most of his adult life offshore in the Gulf of Mexico, working on drilling rigs 2 weeks at a time so his family could have a life I never had growing up. I used to believe that hard work could protect you from pain, that if you provided enough, loved enough, sacrificed enough, life would eventually reward you with peace. I was wrong. Please hit that subscribe button and comment where you're listening from. So let me tell you what happened. But before you judge me, before you decide whether I was cruel or justified, I want you to stay with me until the end, because I need to ask you a question when this is over. And your answer will matter more than you think. My wife's name was Susan Walker. At least, I thought she was my wife. We met when I was 22. She was 20. Back then, she had this smile that made you believe the world was softer than it really was. The kind of smile that made you lower your guard without realizing it. Everyone in my family loved her immediately. My mother said she was a blessing. My friend said I had won the lottery. And for a while, I believed them. We got married in Houston. Small ceremony. Nothing fancy. Just family, a pastor, and a promise that I thought meant forever. 2 years later, our first son Jacob was born. I remember holding him in my arms and thinking, this is it. This is what I work for. Every shift offshore suddenly had meaning. Every storm I survived on that oil rig suddenly felt worth it. I wasn't just Timothy anymore. I was a husband, a father, a provider, a man building a legacy. Or so I thought. The job wasn't easy. 2 weeks on a Gulf rigs. 2 weeks home. Then repeat. Year after year. While I was out there breathing salt air and diesel fumes, Susan was home building what I believed was our life. I trusted her completely. I sent money home without hesitations. She never had to ask twice. Tim, I want to start a business. Done. Tim, the kids need a better school. Done. Tim, my parents need help with their house. Done. If she asked, I provided. That was my role. That was my identity. I thought I was being a good husband. I didn't know I was being played. Emma came next. Our daughter. Beautiful kid. Bright eyes. Always laughing. She used to run to me when I came home from the rigs, like I was the only safe place in her world. And I believed I was. Then Noah came years later. Our youngest. A little more fragile. A little more sensitive. And by then, I thought my life was complete. A wife who loved me. 3 children who depended on me. A house in Dallas. A life I built with sweat and sacrifice. I used to sit in my truck after work sometimes, just staring at the house, thinking, I made it. I really believed I made it. But looking back now, there were signs. Small things. Things I ignored because I trusted too much. Susan became distant sometimes. She would hide her phone quickly. Need I mention her ex calling at 2 a.m.? Don't worry, I will talk about her ex later. She would leave the room when certain calls came in. She would laugh at things I wasn't part of. But I told myself that's normal. Marriage changes. People grow. And I was tired. Too tired to question anything. Because when you're working offshore for 2 weeks at a time, you don't want conflict waiting for you at home. You want peace. So I chose peace over truth. And that was my biggest mistake. It wasn't until Noah got sick that everything started falling apart. It was supposed to be routine. A simple hospital visit. Nothing serious at first. But the doctor came back looking at me differently. Like he had already seen something I hadn't. He was an old classmate of mine. Someone I trusted. He pulled me aside and said something I will never forget. Tim, I need to ask you something carefully. That tone alone changed everything. I told him to just speak. And then he said it. Your blood type is O negative. Your wife's is O positive. Your son, Noah, is AB positive. I remember laughing at first, because I thought it was just science talk, something complicated I didn't need to worry about. But he didn't laugh. He just looked at me and said, "Tim, biologically, that doesn't align." And that's the moment everything went quiet in my head. Not loud, not dramatic, just silence. Like the world paused for a second to let reality sink in. I went home that night and didn't sleep. I kept looking at Susan. She was in bed beside me, and I remember thinking, how can someone sleep so peacefully while my entire world just shifted? I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed truth first, not emotion. Truth. So I ordered DNA tests for all 3 children, and then I waited. 2 weeks. The longest 2 weeks of my life. Every day, I looked at those kids differently. Not because I hated them, but because I suddenly didn't understand life again. I didn't understand anything anymore. And when the results came back, that was when my life ended. I'm serious with you right now. Not physically, but emotionally. Jacob, 0% probability. Emma, 0% probability. Noah, 0% probability. All 3. Not mine. Not even one. I remember dropping the papers on the kitchen table, just staring at them, waiting for them to change, as if reality itself would correct the mistake. But it didn't. It just stayed there. Cold. Final. Unchangeable. And do you know the worst part? It wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even Susan. It was the realization that I had been living inside a story everyone else already knew was fake. Everyone, except me. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I didn't confront her, because I knew something deeper in that moment. If I reacted immediately, I would lose control, and I didn't want anger. I wanted truth. I wanted everything. Every lie, every name, every secret. So I smiled, and I told Susan something I will never forget saying. I told her, "Susan, for our 20th wedding anniversary, I want to do something special." Her eyes lit up immediately, because she thought she was still safe, because she thought I still didn't know. And she said yes before I even finished the sentence. That was the moment I realized something else too. Sometimes people don't just betray you. They underestimate you. She started planning everything, and I paid for everything. Every chair, every light, every flower, every glass of champagne. I funded the celebration of my own betrayal. And now, I need to stop here, because what happened next is where everything changed. The night I turned 20 years of silence into something they will never forget. But before I continue, I want you to think about something. If you discover that your entire marriage, your entire family, your entire life was built on a lie, what would you do? Would you walk away quietly? Or would you make sure the truth was finally seen? The strange thing about revenge is that people imagine it feels hot. They imagine anger, screaming, broken furniture, threats. Maybe that's what happens in movies. But in real life, when you've been betrayed deeply enough, something else happens. You become cold, not because you stop feeling, because you felt too much. For months after those DNA results came back, I lived 2 lives, the man Susan saw every day, and the man gathering evidence against her. Every morning I kissed her goodbye. Every night I asked about her day. I attended church with her, had dinner with her, sat beside her on the couch, and all the while I was learning who she really was. The private investigator I hired was a former federal investigator named Mark Reynolds. The first thing he told me was something I'll never forget. "Timothy, when people hide one lie for 20 years, there's never just one lie." At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. 3 months later, I did. The first report arrived on a rainy Thursday evening while I was offshore. I opened the email in my cabin, expecting confirmation of what I already knew. Instead, I found something worse. Much worse. The affair with Ryan Mitchell wasn't recent. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a rough patch in our marriage. It had been going on for almost 20 years. 20 years. That's 2 decades. Longer than some marriages survive. The CCTV photographs showed them together in cities Susan claimed she'd visited for business conferences. Hotels, restaurants, vacation rentals. There were receipts, bank transfers, messages. Enough evidence to destroy any remaining illusion I still had. But then another name appeared. Jonathan Reed. At first I didn't recognize it. Then I remembered. Jonathan was Susan's first boyfriend. The guy she dated before me. The guy she told me she hadn't spoken to in years. Remember the ex I mentioned earlier that was calling her at 2 a.m.? Yes. On her phone the name was different. The guy who supposedly moved away after college. The investigator uncovered messages dating back nearly 17 years. And that's when I learned the truth about Emma. I remember sitting alone in that offshore cabin, staring at my laptop screen, while waves crashed against the rig outside. Not crying, not yelling, just staring. Because sometimes pain becomes too large for emotion. Sometimes your mind simply shuts down. For 20 years, I thought I knew the woman sleeping beside me. For 20 years, I thought I understood my own life. But every document I opened proved the opposite. There were messages discussing it. Her sister knew too. The affair with Ryan. The relationship with Jonathan. The paternity. Pieces of the truth had been shared among family members for years. The only person they protected from that truth was me. And that's when something changed inside me. The cheating hurt. The lies hurt. But learning that an entire group of people had looked me in the eye for 20 years while protecting those lies, that hit differently. That wasn't betrayal by one person. That was betrayal by an entire community. And yet every Sunday, they sat beside me in church. Every Christmas, they accepted gifts purchased with money I earned. Every birthday, they smiled for family photographs. Not one of them ever said a word. Not one. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Susan in private, because this wasn't a private deception. This lie had been protected publicly. It would be exposed publicly. When I suggested a 20th wedding anniversary vow renewal, Susan nearly cried with happiness. She wrapped her arms around me, called me the most thoughtful husband in the world. And I remember thinking how incredible it was that someone could lie so effortlessly. The venue was one of the most prestigious ballrooms in Dallas. Crystal chandeliers, guests, live music, professional photographers, luxury catering. The entire event cost more money than my father made in several years. And I paid for every single dollar of it. Not because I wanted a celebration, because I wanted a stage. The day finally arrived. Susan looked beautiful. I'll be honest about that. She did. The white gown, the makeup, the smile. For a moment, she looked exactly like the woman I married. And maybe that's what hurt the most. Because beneath all the lies, I still remembered loving her. Not the woman she truly was. The woman I believed she was. Those are two very different people. Guests filled the ballroom. Church friends, family, neighbors, co-workers. Ryan Mitchell arrived with his wife. Jonathan Reed arrived too. Neither man knew what was coming. Susan's mother sat proudly in the front row. I even saw her greeted Jonathan Reed with a kiss. Her sister beside her. Everyone laughing, taking photographs, sharing memories, celebrating a marriage that never really existed. I watched them from across the room and realized something. Every single person there believed they were attending a renewal ceremony. Only one person knew it was actually a funeral. The funeral of my marriage. The evening started exactly as planned. Dinner, speeches, music, laughter. Then the master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, Timothy has prepared a special video tribute for Susan. Applause erupted. Susan smiled. The lights dimmed. The projector screen lowered, and our wedding photos appeared. The room filled with warm reactions. People smiled. Some wiped tears. Pictures from vacations followed. Family gatherings. Birthdays. Anniversaries. 20 years of memories. Susan reached for my hand. I let her. Then the screen went black. The room grew quiet. A single document appeared. DNA test result. The room immediately changed. You could feel it. People leaned forward, confused. Then the next line appeared. Paternity probability, 0%. Everywhere became more silent. The kind of silence that feels heavy. The next result appeared. And then the next. 3 children. 3 tests. 3 impossible truths. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Susan stopped breathing for a second. I saw it happen. That exact moment when she realized the nightmare had begun. Then came the photographs. Ryan entering hotels with Susan. Ryan holding Susan's waist. Ryan kissing Susan at the hotel's balcony. Gasps spread across the ballroom. Then Jonathan appeared. More photographs. More evidence. More dates. More lies. And suddenly the room exploded. People shouting. People crying. Questions flying everywhere. Susan jumped to her feet. Someone turn that off. But there was nothing left to turn off. The truth was already out. I walked to the microphone. Not angry. Not emotional. Just tired. Very tired. The room gradually quieted. Then I spoke. For 20 years, I believed I was building a life with my wife. Nobody moved. For 20 years, I worked offshore in the Gulf of Mexico. I missed holidays, birthdays, school events, family gatherings. Every sacrifice I made was for my family. Susan was crying now, but I kept going. I trusted my wife. I trusted her family. I trusted people sitting in this room. I recently learned that trust was misplaced. Then I looked directly at Susan. The Dallas house has been listed for sale. Gasps. The Escalade has already been repossessed. More gasps. The accounts have been frozen. Her mother stood up. Timothy, stop this. I ignored her. The lake house purchased for Susan's parents has been transferred back into my name. Her father looked like he might collapse. The divorce papers are waiting for your signature. Susan fell into a chair, completely broken. And then I said the final thing. Susan, your future now belongs to the people you chose over me. I set the microphone down and walked away. The shouting started immediately. Not at Susan, at me. Funny, isn't it? For 20 years, people protected the lies. But the moment the truth came out, suddenly I was the villain. Susan's mother chased after me. How could you do this to her? Her sister called me cruel. Church friends call me heartless. The pastor told me public humiliation wasn't God's way. Not one person asked how I felt. Not one. But maybe you will care to ask in the comment section. I walked through those ballroom doors alone. And honestly, I've never felt freer. Outside, the Texas night air felt different. Lighter, like I could finally breathe again. My phone started ringing before I even reached my truck. Susan. Decline. Her mother. Decline. Her sister. Decline. Pastor. Decline. Voicemail after voicemail. Text after text. Every message saying some version of the same thing. You embarrassed her. You disgraced her. You went too far. Nobody said, I'm sorry this happened to you. Nobody said, you didn't deserve this. Nobody said, how are you holding up? Their concern wasn't the lie. It was the exposure. And that told me everything I needed to know. As I drove away from the ballroom, I looked in the rearview mirror one final time. 20 years. Gone. Not because I walked away, because it was never real to begin with. That's the truth nobody wanted to admit. I didn't destroy my marriage that night. I discovered it had already been destroyed years earlier. I was simply the last person to find out. So now I want to ask you something. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I should have handled everything privately. Maybe I should have protected Susan's reputation. That's what her family keeps telling me. They say I disgraced her. They say I humiliated her. They say I embarrassed people who didn't deserve it. Maybe they're right. But after 20 years of deception, after 20 years of sacrifice, after 20 years of being lied to by the person I trusted most, after discovering that other people knew and stayed silent, what exactly was I supposed to protect? The marriage? The reputation? The lie? So tell me, if you were sitting where I sat, if you discovered your spouse had deceived you for 20 years, if you learned that people around you had helped keep that deception alive, would you have quietly walked away? Or would you have done exactly what I did? Please tell me your point of view in the comments, and don't forget to click the subscribe button.